Thank you guys for joining today's session, Grow Your Mind, brought to you by Grow You Now. And of course, we have our amazing host, Fizza here, and I'm going to be reviewing some best practices for resume formatting. We're going to talk about some mistakes to avoid, action verbs to use to make sure your sentences are powerful. This is the golden truth right now. More than your resume, your LinkedIn profile needs to have skills, SEO, in order to be searchable. I'm also going to provide you a resume template, which is going to be extremely useful. It's going to be ATS compatible, easy for copy and pasting when you're applying for jobs. And lastly, it's going to be easy. It's human eye optimized. So with that in mind, let's get started. And if there are any questions in the end, we'll take them at the end, or in between, feel free to ask us. There are some very important mistakes to avoid. There might be even more, but these are some of the few that I've compiled for you guys. I'm going to talk about each of them in detail. The first one is too much technical detail. And it might seem very ironic, but it's also very true. What I mean by this is sometimes we know our technical topic extremely well, and we tend to talk a little too much about it, not realizing that even though you're in the same industry, the other company might do it completely different. And also talking too much technical strips away from how you also interact with others, influence, because it's not just technical, it's a lot more than just that. So we're going to look at some examples as to why this is. So the first one was too much technical. Almost in the same lines is buzzwords and jargons. And I was talking to another client not too long ago, and they were in an interview talking about how they use a very specific type of middleware. And in the interview, they were talking about the name of the middleware that was used in their organization. And guess what? The company that was interviewing them don't necessarily use that exact same middleware, so they are kind of disconnected with the buzzwords and jargons that might be very familiar to you, especially when you spend a little bit longer time in an organization, 2-3 years plus, 5, 6, 7, you get really involved with the acronyms, and it's like breathing. So it's very important to stay away from those buzzwords and jargons and use more industry standard terminologies. Similar to before, when you're too technical, you avoid the evidence of soft skills. There is no way you can get a project forward without influencing others. So the lack of evidence of soft skills and teamwork can really hurt you if it is not there in your work experience, in how you describe how you get to the end result. And we're going to again have a practice session as to what are some poor ways of writing a sentence and how to update that into more effective, longer sentences. This I've seen more often than none, which is highlighting duties instead of accomplishments. Fizza, I want to tap on your shoulders and get your help here. How would you interpret highlighting duties instead of accomplishments? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that means like when you are saying or communicating what you've done, and there isn't a sense of how you can provide value to somebody else. And when you're communicating accomplishment on your resume, you are in a sense saying, this is how I can provide value to you. Here's what I did, and here's what I can do for you also. And if you're communicating duties, you're just saying, I did this, I did this, I did this. And that connection between I've done this and therefore I can do this for you isn't quite made.
That makes sense. And why do you think that happens?
I think it's the language that you use, and language is very powerful. So you could say the same thing and the other person cannot make the connection that say, oh, here's the value that I can get out of this person and their accomplishments. You word it in a way that it is just things that you've done. They aren't able to directly make that connection.
And that language that gets enforced on us happens on a daily basis. That's enforced behavior. A lot of the times we have checklists, we have tasks, we have goals to report up weekly, quarterly, things of that nature. So we get immersed in the daily tasks and duties. And there's another aspect where we take pride in what we do as duties, or we call them as accomplishments, but they're very specific to what we have actually done as a duty. So that's where that reinforcement of behavior happens a lot. But when you go into an interview, people want to see what is the business impact or technical impact or people influence impact that you're bringing. Those are the actual accomplishments, not writing 50 lines of codes, 500 lines of codes, or even 5,000 lines of codes. That is more like a duty, but what is the impact of that? Did it merge into the branch more easily? Did it come with 20% fewer errors? Things of that nature. Even that is a mid-tier accomplishment. I want people to understand that highlighting duties instead of accomplishments is a very big mistake. Not using metrics. Things can get enigmatic. And I think this is a very brilliant thing for us to do, regardless of if you're updating a resume, regardless of if you're looking for a new job. At work, if you're trying to accomplish something more than just duties, asking your manager as to what those metrics that you're trying to accomplish gives everyone a tangible target to attain. Might seem obvious, but it gets lost, especially when people are not aware of it or are too busy just trying to finish one task after the other. So this is what I'd like to think about. Whenever I work with clients and we are trying to update resumes, they go back and think, I should have asked this question to my manager. So before you take the next task or next responsibility, try to identify metrics that you know someday you can put in your resume. Thoughts or comments before we get into some examples?
I think that was very hard for me, especially earlier on in my career, is to find the metrics, because you're not used to thinking that way. And I think early on in your career, you don't want to ask the question because you don't know the answer in your brain. But I think it's very important to have a mentor or have that sort of relationship with your manager where you can say, how do I quantify this? Or how can I? You won't always be able to do that in your own brain.
And I think you hit a point where when you're earlier on in your career, you're getting into the technical depth, but at the same time, you're not at the higher level where you're seeing how as a system things come together. So connecting the dots and adding more business outcome metrics does become a challenge, but it's not impossible to find out. And we're going to help you figure that out today. So let's look at one example here. I want to kind of show you.
Okay, so developed a complex. When I read this, I'm kind of lost in the detail of the things that are done, and it's not really jumping out to me like, what was the accomplishment?
Sure.
So that's my first take on it.
So you would like to see an accomplishment. What else would you like to see?
Yes, definitely. I would like to see an accomplishment and a metric, like you just said. Like it seems very wordy, and when I read through it, it's not jumping at me saying, "Oh wow, this is a skill," or "This is what this person accomplished."
Right.
And this is what they did with me.
It does sound fancy though, some technical jargons and things like that, and especially if you're not in the tech sphere, you're elsewhere, you'll find this kind of cool and like awesome, right? So the improved version led a project to improve our company's decision-making process by creating a data analysis tool. So this is an outcome. This resulted in a 20% increase in efficiency in data processing and a 15% reduction in errors. Nice. Something tangible. And especially we as engineers, even if you're in marketing, you're in business management eventually, or customer experience, we all were trained and conditioned to think as engineers, and we love our numbers. So from that perspective, in fact, even if you're an engineer or not, numbers are something that are tangible that we can hold on to. And of course, you don't want to make this up, you want to back it up. And that's why when you're working, chasing these targets really helps. Whether you hit it or not is different. You learn how to reset the targets going forward. I use my strong problem-solving skills and knowledge of Python and R programming languages. I worked closely with the IT department and the senior management team, who were the primary users of this tool. So there are two very important aspects here, and I want people to remember. We're going to talk about what skills were utilized in this experience. So for example, you are going to have a skills section, which is what we're going to cover later on. But in your work experience, you want to sprinkle these skills because that is how a lot of the applicant tracking systems, ATS, that ingest these resumes are going to be hunting for these skills. And it's going to flag the number of times it shows up. So this is your opportunity to show an outcome with metrics, followed by what skills was utilized in achieving it. And the second piece that I was going to mention was your stakeholders. It speaks to the sphere of influence that you have. And all of this just captured in one essence for one aspect of a work experience.
Okay, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but this is when you go to LinkedIn, you don't want to just copy and paste this. The resume is different than LinkedIn, and I think this is a good place to plug that.
So I'm going to address that question head on. Trends keep changing, and it's very hard to keep up with trends, and that's where I'm here to help. Your LinkedIn profile should not be a replica of your resume at all. And this is the main reason why. If a recruiter sees your LinkedIn profile, they have the opportunity to reject you based on what's in it. So you might not even get to talk to them. There's no one else better to speak about your resume and to your resume than you. So LinkedIn is a way to create intrigue and interest for the recruiter or the hiring manager to want to pick up the phone or email you and connect with you. You're not going to put this in your LinkedIn profile. It's going to be worded extremely differently. And that will be another podcast. When people are interested, we're going to do that later.